Thompson, welcome to Fine is a four-letter word.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here, Lori. Thanks for having me on the show.
My pleasure. I know we have a really interesting topic today. It's a little bit different than what I've talked to about with some of my other guests. I will start with the question though that I start with a lot of the interviews, and that is I'm just curious, what kind of beliefs were you raised with? Good, bad, however you want to label them. What were the beliefs that were really instilled in you as you were growing up?
Sure. So, I was adopted as an infant by parents who really wanted a child. And they only had high school educations. They weren't, super high achievers or anything like that. And they just kind of raised me with a belief, I guess you can do anything, but yet there was no real expectation that I had to live up to. A lot of parents who raise high achievers, they have all these hard expectations to meet. I don't ever remember them saying, "Well, why didn't you get an A on the spelling test?" I mean, generally I did, but there was never any expectation of that. And so it was just a fun way to be raised. Instead, they just gave me these opportunities. So if I said, "Ooh, I want to try a dance class," next thing I knew, I was enrolled in tap. Now, I wasn't allowed to quit till that season was over. There was the you don't get to quit. You made a commitment for a season, but I never had
Mm-hmm.
to sign up for it again. So I had to finish out a season of whatever I signed up for. But I mean, I did baton twirling, gymnastics, cheerleading, volleyball. I mean, you name it. If I signed up, I got to play the season. And what a great way to be raised where you had just exposure to anything you showed an interest in without any
Yeah.
real expectation of what you had to be.
Right, right. It allowed you to explore who you wanted to be.
Yeah. And to achieve in the things that made sense. I stuck with piano a
Mm-hmm.
lot more than a season,
Okay.
but
All right.
that was it just it that idea that you had really limitless opportunity but no expectation you had to live up to, I think is the best way to describe the way my parents raised me. And you know, that I think the other thing on their side as a parent, it makes you proud of anything the child does stick with and do
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
without
Yeah. I
ever
think
feeling
that's
like they let you down.
unusual.
It is.
Right.
It is unusual. I can't say I
Because
lived up to it as a parent, right? That was
okay, yeah. I mean, because you hear these stories of most people were raised with some kind of expectation of being of achieving that put
Mhm.
pressure on them as children and then played out in some weird way as they got older.
Right.
Um, yeah,
And
yeah.
so, with that kind of an opportunity, it left me having desires to achieve things
Mm-hmm.
that I was interested in achieving for reasons that were entirely mine. And I mean, my dad beamed so big when I graduated law school. He goes around places and says, if they say something silly, oh, I don't know, I might have to tell my lawyer about that.
The dad jokes. Uh-huh.
you know, it's pretty great. Yeah.
So that gave you the belief that you could try out anything
Hmm.
and nothing bad, like quote unquote bad or horrible, would happen from
Nope.
taking those chances.
Right, because anything was going to be for a season, and if it wasn't what I wanted, I can do the next thing for the next season. And that has played out as a theme just of our entire lives. I mean, I've been married to my husband 29 years. He is not a season. He is the one I signed up for permanently from the beginning.
Okay.
But I mean, apart from that, our jobs, our states, the things we've done, they've been seasons, and things weren't necessarily meeting up to an expectation at some time or another, and that's okay. You turn the corner, you go into the next season.
Yeah. Did he have the same beliefs as you when you got
Um,
together, or is that something that he's learned from you?
I think his parents were very much the same. We were both first children. His dad did some schooling, And he worked in an engineering type role, which is a high achiever role, but without a degree back in the day when you could do it by skill and training, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so I don't think his parents put a lot of super high expectations, but he was an achiever as well, so very self-driven. And so when we met up, our compatibility, uh, even the decision of our marriage, I mean, I'd known him forever. I'd known him since I was 11 years old in middle school when our mothers did aerobics together. Um,
Wow.
but but I think when we came back into each other's lives as early 20s, um, we really more decided because of our compatibility that we should pursue a relationship and get married with very little emotion and love that usually starts out most relationships. It's not that the kissing is bad, I mean, um, but it was really far less on the emotion side than it was on the compatibility of the way we believed and the way we saw life.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. And yet it's worked out.
Oh,
Like
absolutely.
it, yeah. It's
So,
almost as you're saying that, I'm thinking of those arranged marriages that were like a business decision where people grew to love each other later.
So, yeah, well, and I'm not saying there wasn't any attraction. I'm not saying there wasn't interest. I'm not saying that those things weren't present, but it wasn't that madly head over heels, I'm so emotional, falling in love thing. We had both done that before.
Hmm.
But I think I mean, even in our early 20s, had grown enough to recognize that's not the good basis for a good long relationship. Compatibility is the thing that makes it last. So while I never did the online dating, when eHarmony came out years later, I said, yep, that one would probably work because that's based on those
Heidi
measures
Thompson,
of
welcome to
compatibility that
Fine
just
is a
make
four-letter
sense.
word.
So,
My pleasure. I know we have a really interesting
okay.
topic today. It's a little bit different than what I've talked to about with some of my other guests. I will start with the question though that I start with a lot of the interviews, and that is, I'm just curious, what
Okay.
kind of beliefs were you raised with? Um, good, bad, however you want to label them. What were the beliefs that were really instilled in you
Okay.
as you were growing up?
Oh, that's crazy. Because that's based on those measures of compatibility that just make sense. So,
Hang on one second. It said the recording started uploading. Please do not close this tab. But it should still be recording. It says it's still recording. Why is it uploading? So now I'm not sure what it's doing. I am going to stop the recording and restart it.
okay.
Also, you're not coming through my headphones right now. Why is that? Hang on. Fun with internet connections. So, yeah. So, what were you saying? You were saying about just the partnership and how well it's worked that you had that the
Compatibility.
compatibility. Yeah.
Exactly. So years later, when eHarmony finally came out, I said, "Oh, I bet that would work great because it's based on the compatibility idea, not the emotion idea." Because, when you're married any length of time, it's a roller coaster. That emotion side, you fall in and out of love with your spouse in all different seasons of your life. But if you're really compatible, ultimately you're still making decisions the same way. Ultimately, you're still heading the same direction, and you always end up pulling it back together. And so I get that. That makes sense to me.
Yes. I was listening to a podcast. I can't remember the guy's name who was talking, and he was saying that true relationships that work for the long term, have a connection. It's not just it is a compatibility, but then there's also that deeper connection that is more than just like you said, like more than an attraction.
Yes.
It's a connection.
I totally agree, 100%. And it doesn't hurt that his parents and my parents have both stayed married 52 years. And so there's a certain longevity already and stability in both our lives that, you know, we weren't raised with the drama that a lot of other kids have that creates some uncertainty and questioning around relationships. We
Right.
didn't
Right.
really
Well,
have
and you
that.
had good role models. Role models.
Exactly.
I mean, that's what in anything when you talk about people who are born in certain neighborhoods or circumstances, again, it's about having role models. One of my passions is, being a good, like, I there's an organization I was just talking to this week that works with young girls 10 to 17, teaching them how to be responsible, basically like how to adult, learning the life skills that they may or may not be getting at home. And so exposing them to new ideas and new opportunities, like, just to be a role model. Because when you don't have role models, how do you know what's possible?
Exactly right. Exactly
Yeah.
right. And I'll
Tell
tell
me.
you what, I very much believed because I spent years in school counseling working with teenage girls, particularly, I mean, girls and boys, but I really did do a lot with the teenage girls. And a lot of them, exactly like you say, really didn't have good role models. And I really developed the idea that if I invested into their lives and really became that voice in their head, that someone would do that for my kids as well. That, you know, if you plant
Mm.
that seed, there would be other people doing that to my kids as well. And I found that to bear out in so many ways. There were so many other wonderful adults that spoke life into my kids the same way I tried to into those. So, yeah, I totally believe in the role model philosophy.
And sometimes it gets into their minds a little deeper if it's not coming from the parents.
Exactly. Yeah, as long as they're the right messages and they were.
Correct.
So I'm
Well,
very
but it goes
grateful.
both ways. So even if they're not, yeah.
Yep, you
Right,
got it.
right. Yeah. So talk a little bit about you mentioned your school counselor journey, and then you also mentioned having a law degree. And I know that you are not doing, that you're doing something different now
Yeah,
than
so
the counseling. So talk about that journey, because I want to also the pieces that we were talking about earlier about not being afraid to try new things.
play right in. It's that same theme. It just bears out that things are for a season and you're willing to try the next thing. And that is absolutely our story. So, um, if you'd have asked me in eighth grade what I was going to be a lawyer. I love to
Okay.
out argue my teachers, and I always felt like I was right. and
Of
and
course
you
you were.
because of course. And I mean, I even had one teacher who put me in charge of the class because she felt like I did understand English better than she did. And so I kind of taught the
Wow.
class, but I know that it's sad. But eighth grade was a weird year. What can I say?
It is for everyone, really.
So anyway, grew up kind of questioning, arguing. I'm not going to say non-compliant. I wasn't a real rule breaker, but I definitely had a reason to question that, and it had to make sense. And so law was a natural fit when you're tearing apart and questioning why doesn't this make sense? And so there really wasn't another idea going through high school of what I was going to be. But when you get to college, you have to major in something. And you don't get to major right in law. You pick something as an undergrad major. Well, I had enjoyed psychology as an elective in high school, and it's not a bad elective for understanding people, which is good for law. So I thought, okay, I'll major in psych. So I get to my childhood development class with Bev Lowry, and she was just a wonderful, wonderful professor. And she's talking as a mother about children and the joy of children. And of course, that doesn't fit very well with the whole idea of being a lawyer. You can't be a lawyer and be a mom. That doesn't, and I don't know what she did, but I mean, I must have been 19, not even 20. And all of a sudden, my biological clock is going, ooh, you need to have a child. I'm going,
Oh, geez.
what? So I decide, you know what? I need to get my ring by spring or my money back guarantee here at my college. And I start looking for a husband. Really want that MRS degree. And not too far down the line, my husband came back into my life and we pointed at each other and said, yeah, let's make a run of this. We did. We both left college and got married, started our jobs, and then finished school at night. So we,
Wow.
you know,
That
we,
is
so we,
really unusual. Like, that is impressive.
yeah, we did what we had to do. I mean, we both knew what it was still on the plate, but we wanted to do that together now and not apart. And we weren't near each other, so it wouldn't have worked the other way. And so that's what we decided. And so anyway, so we went through that season. And I finished my degree in January, got pregnant in February, and yeah, a month later. And then 9 months later, just as I'm wrapping up, I'm still working in contracts for a Department of Energy thing. I guess that's a related law job, but it was the most boring job in the world. It was literally cutting and pasting text from DOE regulations into things for contractors and sending out letters saying, "Are you in compliance?" and then putting in a database how they're in compliance. It was the most boring job in the whole wide world. But it
Yeah,
paid well.
wow.
I mean, for just barely getting out of college. So anyway, so I was doing that, went out on maternity leave, and while I'm on maternity leave, I get this letter in the mail that says, "We're doing a voluntary reduction in force." Well, I was the last hired, who's going to be involuntarily
Mm.
cut. Yeah, that would have been me. And they said, "But if you take advantage of this voluntary thing, we will pay for this much towards schooling." And I thought, huh, that's interesting. So I could stay home and go get a master's degree in something. And I kid you not, it must have been that week. One of my best friends I grew up with called me and said, they're doing a master's in school counseling right now. I was thinking about enrolling. I said, "You've got to be
Wow.
kidding me." So I enroll in the Master's in School Counselors program and I go and get my master's. We moved to Florida because someone would have to die in Washington to get a counseling job. The people stay there till they're 89. And,
Eh,
um, we moved to Florida for my husband to go work at Disney World. I'm able on our house hunting trip to land a job as a school counselor with that master's degree in pocket and now two kids because that's what you do
Okay.
is have another kid while you're getting a master's degree.
Sure.
And of course.
Perfect sense. Yeah. Well, it does
Um,
not surprise me at all for you, though, because you are clearly a high achiever.
yeah, it's a silly world, yeah, for our family. But so anyway, we get to raise our kids now around Disney World, and we were there for 6 years from the time they were 2 and 3 to the time they were 8 and 9, having all their birthday parties at Disney. I mean,
Hmm.
that's not too shabby, really, when you grow up.
Right.
I mean, where do you go on vacation when you live there and go there 5 times a week, you know?
You don't have to go on, you don't have to go anywhere. So you save money on vacations.
There you go. Maybe that's what we should have done. That might have been more fiscally responsible looking back. Anyway, you make those mistakes for sure. So I'm working as a school counselor. My kids are growing up. Things are working great. And I step up to a point where I lead the school counseling department. 13 counselors. We're growing up to the point of 5,000 students when it's time for the new school to be built. I go over to the new school. I'm part of a team of 4 that opens a high school with 2,500 kids, grades 9 through 12. Most schools that open will start with ninth and 10th. We decided, hey, let's just go for it. Let's just take them all. And so we did a crazy thing and opened a school that was great fun. About that time, I'm getting a little burned out. I've kind of done what you can do with school counseling. I know that sounds weird, but I tried it. And I get this letter in the mail. That seems to be a theme in my life. I get a letter
I
in the
got
mail.
this letter in the mail.
And it said that the place where I did my undergrad schooling, Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia, was starting a law school and that they were opening up scholarships to the first inaugural class that went through there. So I show this to my husband and I say, "Hey, look, they're opening a law school. What do you think?" And he says to me, "Well, you'd be an idiot not to apply for that." I said, "Yeah, but we'd have to uproot our family, move to Virginia. You'd have to leave your job at Disney." He goes, "Yeah, and you'd get a law degree." I mean, just like that. Like it was not
Hmm.
even a big
Hmm.
consideration for him. How great is I mean, how great is
That
this
is
man,
great.
right?
And how old were you at that time?
I was, let's see, that would have made me 29 years old.
Okay. So not that
Not
old,
old,
but
old.
still older than a typical law student. And a lot of times people are like, well, I'm too old to do whatever, go to law school,
Oh,
get
yeah,
that
no.
master's degree, whatever it is. There is no time limit on it.
There most certainly is not. In fact, there was one man that was near 50 when he started law school with me.
Hmm.
Yeah. He actually
Yeah,
had other
good.
professional degrees and was decided on law school. So, yeah,
Yes.
it's never too late to take the next step if that makes sense for your next season.
Right. Right.
And it's never too late to turn around if you decide it doesn't make sense for that season.
Right. And you want to go back to doing the thing that you were doing before if that
Which,
feels like the right
right,
thing to do.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. Which leads right into the next part of the story. So I finished
Okay.
my law school. I fully planned to move back to Florida, which I love. I've always loved Florida. It's a magic place for me. So I passed the bar in Florida, believing, okay, now it's just time for Eric to find a job and me to open a practice. Let's go. 2007. Guess what was happening to the economy in 2007?
Yeah. It was on its way down.
It was on its way down, and Florida had already been one of the first to go. Um, there were just no jobs. My husband applied for everything for probably 9 months, and there was just nothing in Florida.
Hmm.
Fortunately, he was still employed, so it's not like he was without a job. He was able to provide, but I'm just kind of in a holding pattern because
Hmm. Hmm.
what am I doing next? He learns that Houston's economy hasn't really tanked yet, and that there were opportunities with GE in Houston where he could have a pretty easy in. And I
Okay.
said, "Ooh, Houston, really? You want to move to Texas? That's not Florida." What? I
I'm
wasn't
with
too
you on
sure
that.
about that. Yeah, I wasn't too sure about that. And I started researching and said, you know what? It's still better than where we are in Virginia, and I think I could learn to like it there. And besides, they have good food and lots of meat, and that works for me. So I
Lots
kind
of
of went
meat.
for it.
So that does not work for me, but I'm glad it
I'm
worked for
sorry.
you. Yeah, it's all good.
Red meat, chocolate, wine, yeah, staples to my diet. Yes, yes. Anyway, so we moved to Houston. Well, I had missed the window to take the bar there. So I wasn't going to sit around for a year and wait and prep for another bar. I think I'm just going to go back into school counseling for a year, take the bar next summer, and then I'll start my practice and we'll move forward with that next step. Well, the problem was, um, I really liked what I was doing then in school counseling. After the push, push, push of law school and
Hmm.
the bar exam, the demands at those schools were see kids, solve problems, make families happy. It
Mm.
turned into a great job.
Yeah.
I really liked
Right.
what I was doing. I was speaking life into people, and my kids at that point were getting to the point where they were going to be at my high school with me.
Hmm.
And so it
So that
was
makes convenient.
and I loved having teenage kids.
Okay.
Lots of other people love little kids. I'm okay with little kids. I loved being around my teenage kids. And so that was just a really special season of my life to be there with my kids. And so I'm loving my life. We have a beautiful home. We have great friends at church. We're eating well. I love my job. My kids are there with me. And my son starts to develop into something a little different. We start to see him finding his niche in the things that he's been trying. And we realize that he's got a really, really outstanding talent in singing, dance, and acting.
Okay.
So we take him to a national competition in New York City, and they say he needs to be in LA.
Okay. So did you
Okay.
immediately pack up the car and drive to
Pretty
LA?
close. Pretty close. Pretty close to that. So my husband and I say, okay, if that's the next chapter for us, my husband needs a job there. We never move without a job. We're not that foolish, but if there's a job, we'll go wherever the job is.
Okay.
So my husband
And
finds a job with GE in California. It takes about a year before we get that job in LA and we move out there.
did you
Well,
go out before him or you wouldn't
no,
have done that?
I
Okay.
did not do that. No, our family does better as an intact unit.
Okay.
We
All right.
function well together. I might have done a month before something had we needed to, but that's not the way we decided to do it. So I ended up finishing out my school year contract and we moved in the summer, and that worked out beautifully for both of us.
Mhm.
Those kinds of things just tend to work out. So here we are in California trying to make my son get started in Hollywood. Well, wouldn't you know it? When he did that competition, he was the runner up in the 13 to 18-year-old category when he was 14, and
Okay.
he looked 12.
All right.
Okay. Well, in
Because
that 1 year period, he grew 8 inches and no longer looked 12.
so not the same child that they had put in awarded that position.
You got it. So now he's looking like a 16-year-old at 14 instead of, I mean, at 15 when he looked like a 12-year-old at 14.
Got it.
Well, they can use 18-year-olds and not have to pay for set people and not have to have all this expense to play 16-year-olds. They don't need a 14-year-old to play, 15-year-old to play a 16-year-old.
Right.
So
So
now
now
he's not that
he's
year,
not is not that employable
he's not that
or that
employable.
attractive as as an actor. Yeah.
Right. So a lot of the push to get there was now a little bit in vain. He did get in mid-year into Orange County School of the Arts, which is quite an honor. It's one of the top 10 arts schools in the
Mhm.
country for high school. He was offered mid-year admission, which they never do. They just liked him and offered him mid-year admission. He was applying for the next fall. They let him in mid-year. They offered him either musical theater or dance. Their musical theater program then didn't have dance. Now they've integrated better, and I'm glad of that. But at the
Mhm.
time, it was one or the other, and so he ended up going dance. He definitely excelled in that arena. And we stayed out there until a year after his high school. He landed some fun gigs. He got to be, eh, some movies, some TV, a boy band. There were some fun gigs, but nothing ever made enough money that it made sense to rent the sunshine in California.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
So
And
then
so
you moved on to the next adventure. Like
I did.
the
Yeah.
whole theme of your life is jump and
Yes.
jump again and jump again and
Yep.
just keep going. Like there was that book, man, I'll have to look up who it was about always saying yes.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
whatever the opportunity is that comes up, say yes.
So I know Laurel Langemeyer wrote Yes Energy, which is based on that idea. I don't know if that's the one you're talking about, but the
That's not,
idea is certainly the same idea. It's when opportunities arise, you're better off to say yes and then figure out how than to say no and let them pass by.
yeah. Shonda Rhimes
Oh,
has a
love
book
her.
called My Year of Saying Yes to Everything.
Oh, that's even better. Shonda Rhimes is just yes. Yes, please.
Mm-hmm.
How much success has she seen? Holy cow, I
Right.
think I've watched everything she's ever done.
Yeah. So that whole idea of saying yes and not being afraid, which is pretty unusual because most people they're evaluating all of the things that could go wrong. Well, what if this? What if that? And you turn that around and say, what if these amazing things happen? What if
Well,
this? Yeah.
or even what's the worst thing that could go wrong? Could I live with it? Okay, then it's
Hmm.
worth trying.
Right. Your method of evaluation seems so much different from so many people, and in a good way because you're living a more adventurous life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it has. It's been one adventure after the other. So from there, California came to a close. My son went off to college, and my husband and I moved back to Washington State where we could save some money where my family is.
Mm.
He was able to at that point work remotely so we could live anywhere. I moved to where my family was. I got a job in a school district. The school counseling jobs, incidentally, weren't open. We're back to the area where people live, stayed in those jobs till they were 90, right? We talked
Yes,
about that at the
right.
beginning. Yes.
Yes, you
So we're back up
mentioned.
there. But at that point, I had had so much experience all over the country that I had worked in developing behavior systems that they were interested in that this school district didn't have. So they hired me as a district level person to bring in positive behavior into the schools.
Mm.
And so I got to create those programs district wide, pre K to 12 for 17,000 kids. I got to do teacher seminars and coach teachers on how to deal with behavior, coach counselors on how to deal with difficulties in behavior, bring in some social and emotional learning, work with community schools to bring people into the schools that can handle physical needs. I mean, it was just a cool job. I loved what I was doing there. But then my husband's ability to work remotely ended, and they
Mm.
announced to him, you need to go find a GE office somewhere. Okay, well, there we go. One of the places that was hiring was in Scottsdale, Arizona. And incidentally, my son had chosen to go to GCU right here in Phoenix. And so it was like, okay, well, then let's go live in the sunshine again. We hated the winter up in Washington, and that was a bad one. The last one was a really bad one. So they didn't have to twist my arm all that hard, but we moved
Mm-hmm.
here without my job and just him again. And I'm on a contract still with my school district, still helping the new person they hired to get on board, do some consulting for the school district part-time. And I was figuring out, well, what do I do next? So I enrolled in a doctorate program thinking, well, maybe I'll move into something in the superintendent realm. I don't know. Took that first class, did fine, went back to a 10-year law school reunion just to see the people. No interest in doing law. I had been too far out of that world at this point, 11 years out of that world,
Right.
right?
And I was going to ask you if during that time you had regrets about getting your law degree because you weren't using it.
Yes, I very often would tell people I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. That was a lot of work to go through. I'm happy doing these other things. They're meaningful. Why would I go and do that? It would, steal my soul. I said all these horrible things during all
Mm.
those years about that. But I go to this
Kind of
law
to
school
justify the fact that you weren't using it.
maybe, and also probably to justify it to my husband because of the sacrifices he made so that I could get it. Yes,
Right,
probably
right,
some of
right.
that for
Okay.
sure.
So
Yes.
you go to the class reunion.
Which these are wonderful people. I love them to death, and I couldn't wait to see them and hang out with these people. Well, one of the guys there grabbed me by the arm. I mean, both hands around my arm and said, "You need to be doing what I'm doing." And I said, "What are you doing? What are you doing, Josh? What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm doing estate planning." And I said,
You're
That's
funny.
funny. I'd have to take a bar in Arizona and study a whole new area. Yep, you're going to take the bar, you're going to come down to Florida, you're going to spend a week with me, you're going to go back and do this in Arizona. And he said it just like that. Like he was
Wow.
so confident I was going to do this. And I thought this was the funniest thing he ever said. Unfortunately, he
Yeah.
said it in front of my husband. So my husband is kind of poking at me. Arizona's a place for retirees. This would be a great place to do estate planning. Why don't you go do estate planning? And I, so I decide to do some research. Well, as I do some research, what I realize is it's seminar work, it's teaching, it's coaching, it's working with people solving problems, it's counseling, it's all these things I've been doing all these years. It's
Isn't it
exactly
interesting?
that.
Isn't it interesting how sometimes people outside of yourself can see better I don't want to say what you should be doing, but what you are suited for than
Mhm.
you can see for yourself?
Yeah, I never would have picked it. In
Mm.
a million years, never would have picked it. But Josh's little conspiracy with my husband had
Mhm.
me looking into this thing. And so I did just that. While I was consulting for the school district up in Washington, I was prepping for the bar here. Passed the bar. By the time that was done, I was ready to start opening a practice. And so that's what you do. You move to a new place where you don't know anybody to do something you've never done when you've never run a business before.
Mm.
It's a great
Yes.
business model. Absolutely.
Well, it doesn't surprise me at all that that's what you would do based on all of these opportunities that you have said yes to all the way along, even
Yeah.
when you didn't know how it was going to work out or you didn't have any guarantee or you're just going with the flow, which is amazing.
Ah, it's
So,
just a
yeah.
crazy life. But you know what? Going back again to that parent's philosophy,
Mhm.
you know, you can try anything you want. You're going to finish the season of it. You're going to have lots of opportunities, but there's no expectation you necessarily have to meet.
I love that way of thinking, not just for raising children, but for living your life. Because as we've said, it just opens you up to so many more amazing experiences that you would not otherwise have.
Right.
And what did you tell me before we hit record? What are you doing next? Your next big adventure?
Oh my gosh, yes. So my CPA friend Anne and I are jumping out of a perfectly good airplane next Tuesday for the very first time. Tandem,
I
of
want
course, but
to, right, right. I want to see pictures. That's something I've contemplated. I don't know. It scares
Groupon
me,
has
but
it for
it's just,
$145. I mean,
yeah.
if it's
I
time
don't
to
know that I want to go
pull the
to the
plug.
cheapest bidder on that,
No, but
but
I mean, it's the full scale, Skydive
yeah,
Arizona. It's a known group to do
yeah.
it. They've got a good safety rating, but yeah, but it's not even I can't even say, well, it's too expensive. It's
All right.
that
No
point you just
excuses. You're
no
doing it.
excuses. I'm doing it. And
No.
so yeah, Tuesday that's she finishes tax day on the 17th and the 18th is our skydiving day.
Yes. So we will put in the show notes because by the time we publish this, you will have already done it. And so
And
we
I will
can.
have video clip. I am buying the video. So presuming there's no tech difficulties, I should have that for sure.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, I am so glad that you were able to come on and share your philosophy, which is seemingly so different from a lot of people's, of just keep doing the next right action, keep taking the next
Yeah,
right step. And if it doesn't turn out the way you expected, then you do something else.
that's
And if
Princess
it
Anna,
does,
in Frozen 2. She does
I
that
have
whole
not
song.
even,
Just do the next right thing.
I haven't seen it, so I didn't know, but I must be
Oh,
channeling her anyway.
there you go. I mean, it sounded
So
just like her. Ah.
speaking of songs, what is your walk up, the song, your hype song, the song that gets you inspired when you need a
Okay, well,
little
it's gonna
extra juice?
it'll make total sense to you. It's Katy Perry's Roar. I got the eye of the
Yes.
tiger fighter, I'm a champion and you're gonna hear me roar. It's just rah. Pure girl energy, right?
Right. Love it. Strong women like Katie and you. Yes. Love it. Now, how can my listeners get in touch with you if they wanted to learn more about your philosophy of life?
Okay. Well, you can get in touch with me if you go to www.lifeguardinglegacies.com. That is my business
Okay.
website. You'll definitely learn about my business there. Up to the right, there will also be a link for Sojourner AZ. That's not a primary business. In fact, I've done absolutely nothing with that business per se. But when you pull that one up, it'll have this like Renaissance woman next door and a bunch of weird things that I can do for people that have nothing to do in some cases with law. But it definitely, if you're looking for more life philosophy, you're going to see it permeate that place more than the lifeguarding legacies. As an attorney, people still have some expectations of what that should look like. If they want another way they could learn actually some fun things about me and learn about that area is I'm happy to give a free copy of my ebook. This is Lifeguard Your Legacy. It's written in what I call sixth grade blog speak. It is not technical. It is not attorney legalese. It is blog related writing about the questions people have in estate planning and things even every 18-year-old through every 97-year-old should know about how the way this kind of stuff works so that you don't make some common mistakes. And you can get that by going to lifeguardinglegacies.com/book dash freebie. And if you give me your email and name, you'll be able to download a copy on the next screen.
Fantastic. We'll put that all in the show notes as well so that those
Okay.
links will be there. And yeah, I that is just so important because a lot of my listeners are probably at the point where they maybe have a will or an estate plan and maybe they don't. But as I know my dad's been on me for a very long time and I'm finally getting it done. But I
Good.
have been guilty of not having it done. So I can't imagine again that I am the only one out there who doesn't. So if somebody
You're
can learn something from you,
72% of people don't have a plan that would work for them now. So you're in way too many of that group.
wow, I didn't
So
realize that was so high.
yeah, it's so high. About 50% have done it at one time or another, but if the way it's written would not actually fit their current situation. So it's pretty
Mm,
low. It's pretty low. So yeah,
all right.
so get that off the procrastination list and be part of the 27, 28%, right? That's the part you want to be in.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining me today, Heidi, on
Happy to.
fine is a four-letter word.